The Great Hall of the Galactic Concord was the largest structure ever built by intelligent life. It floated in the empty space between three ancient star systems. Its walls were made of living crystal that had grown for 10,000 years. Light from a captured star filled every corner with a golden glow. This was where the rulers of the galaxy met to decide the fate of civilizations. Ambassador Elena Vance walked into this hall with her head held high. She was a small woman with gray hair and calm eyes. Behind her walked 12 other humans, all dressed in simple black suits. They looked tiny compared to the alien beings that filled the massive room. 12 species ruled the Galactic Concord. They called themselves the Elder Races. The Valori were beings made of living crystal, and they had traveled the stars when Earth was still covered in ice. The Kreth were massive creatures with 4 arms and skin like stone. They believed strength was the only truth. The Nethkai were thin and tall, with minds that could solve problems no computer could handle. Each species had ruled their corner of the galaxy for longer than humans had existed. They all looked down at the human delegation. Some looked curious. Most looked bored. A few looked annoyed that they had to waste time on such a young and unimportant species. The Valori High Speaker rose from its throne. Its body was made of purple crystal that sang with a soft tone when it moved. It was older than human civilization. It had seen species rise and fall like waves on an ocean. "Humanity," the High Speaker said. Its voice echoed through the hall like music. "You have come to ask for membership in the Galactic Concord. You have come to ask for trade agreements and protection. We have considered your request." Elena Vance nodded. She had spent 3 years preparing for this moment. Humanity had worked hard to reach the stars. They had built colonies on 40 worlds. They had developed technology that impressed even the elder races. They had been peaceful neighbors, good trading partners, and reliable allies in small conflicts. She believed they had earned their place at this table. "The Concord has decided," the High Speaker continued. "We will allow humanity to join our great union, but there are conditions." Elena felt hope rise in her chest. Conditions were normal. Every species had to follow rules. She was ready to negotiate. "First," the High Speaker said, "humanity will give up 70% of its colonial territories. These worlds will be managed by the Concord for the benefit of all species." The hope in Elena's chest turned cold. 70%. That was not a negotiation. That was theft. "Second, humanity will submit to genetic oversight. Your species breeds too quickly. This is dangerous. Concord scientists will manage your population growth to ensure stability." Elena's hands tightened into fists at her sides. She kept her face calm, but inside she felt something break. "Third, humanity will accept permanent observer status. You may attend Concord meetings. You may speak when spoken to. But you will never vote. You will never hold power. You are too young, too dangerous, too human." The Kreth ambassador laughed. It was a deep, rumbling sound like rocks falling down a mountain. "Be grateful, little species," it said. "Many young races are simply destroyed. We are offering you survival." The Nethkai representative tilted its long head. "Your kind has potential," it said in a voice like dry leaves. "In perhaps 10,000 years, you may earn greater privileges, if you behave." Around the hall, the other species nodded and murmured agreement. This was how things worked. Young species served. Elder species ruled. This was the natural order of the galaxy. Elena Vance stood very still. The other humans behind her were silent, but she could feel their anger like heat from a fire. 3 years of work, decades of hope, centuries of dreaming about the stars. And this was what the galaxy offered them, slavery with a polite name. She thought about Earth's history. She thought about all the times her people had been told to kneel, to submit, to accept their place. She thought about all the times they had refused. Slowly, Elena closed her datapad. She looked up at the Valori High Speaker. She looked at the Kreth ambassador and the Nethkai representative. She looked at every alien face in that great hall. "No," she said. The word was quiet, but it echoed in the sudden silence. The High Speaker's crystal body flickered with confusion. "No? You do not understand. These are not suggestions. These are our terms. Accept them or—" "Or what?" Elena asked. Her voice was still calm, still quiet. "You will destroy us? Perhaps. But you will not own us. You will not control our children. You will not take our worlds." She shook her head slowly. "We came here seeking partners. We found masters looking for slaves. We have nothing more to discuss." She turned and walked toward the door. The other humans followed her. The Kreth ambassador slammed one of its massive fists on its table. "You cannot simply leave. The Concord does not permit—" "The Concord," Elena said without turning around, "has no power over those who do not recognize it." She kept walking. The hall exploded with noise. Aliens shouted and argued. Some laughed at the foolishness of these primitive creatures. The Nethkai representative watched with its cold, calculating eyes. The Valori High Speaker simply stood in confused silence. The great doors closed behind the human delegation. The Kreth ambassador made a sound of disgust. "Let them go. They will return within one cycle, begging for any terms we offer. They have no choice. They are weak. They are alone. They are nothing." The other species agreed. Humanity was young. Humanity was small. Humanity would learn its place, or humanity would die. These were the only options the galaxy offered. The Concord returned to its other business. The matter of humanity was already forgotten. A minor annoyance, a small joke, a lesson that young species always learned eventually. In her ship, flying away from the Great Hall, Elena Vance finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of what had happened. She had just rejected the most powerful organization in the galaxy. She had just made enemies of species that could crush Earth with barely any effort. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady when she opened a communication channel to Earth. "This is Ambassador Vance. The negotiations have failed. Activate Protocol Omega. It is time to show the galaxy who we really are." Somewhere in the dark space around Sol, lights began to turn on. Machines that had been sleeping for decades started to wake. Ships that officially did not exist began to move. The galaxy thought it knew humanity. The galaxy was wrong. 6 months after the humans walked out of the Galactic Concord, the first problems began to appear. Trade Minister Vos Keth of the Kreth Dominion stared at his reports with growing confusion. The numbers did not make sense. Shipments were late. Factories were closing. Prices were rising on goods that had always been cheap and plentiful. "What is happening?" he demanded. "Why are our medical supplies running low? Why are the construction materials not arriving?" His assistant, a young Kreth with nervous eyes, pulled up a map of trade routes. Large sections were marked in red. "The human transit corridors, Minister. They are closed. All human trade has stopped." Vos Keth waved one of his forearms in dismissal. "Then use other routes. Go around their space." "Minister, we have tried. The alternative routes add months to every journey. The costs are destroying us." The minister stared at the map. He had never really looked at it before. He had never noticed how many important trade routes passed through human space. He had never realized how central those primitive creatures had become to galactic commerce. But now he saw it. Human space sat at the crossroads of the galaxy. Their territory connected the eastern reaches to the western colonies. Their space stations had serviced ships from 100 species. Their workers had built and maintained equipment across 1,000 worlds. And now all of that was gone. The same scene played out across the galaxy. On the Valori homeworld, the crystal beings discovered that their food processing facilities had stopped working. Human engineers had built those facilities. Human technicians had maintained them. Without them, the machines sat silent and dark. On Nethkai Prime, the great universities found that half their research equipment no longer functioned. The parts had come from human factories. The replacement parts were not coming. Species that had sneered at humanity's primitive industriousness now discovered an uncomfortable truth. They had let humans do their difficult work. They had let humans build their machines, grow their food, and maintain their infrastructure. It had seemed like a good arrangement. The humans were happy to work. The elder races were happy to let them. Now the workers were gone, and nothing worked anymore. The Galactic Concord called an emergency meeting. Representatives from all 12 elder races gathered to discuss what they called the human problem. "We must force them to reopen their borders," the Kreth ambassador declared. "Send warships. Show them the price of defiance." "And how do we reach them?" the Nethkai representative asked. Its voice was cold and mocking. "Their space is closed. Our scouts cannot find a way through. They have blocked every entry point. Then we go around. We attack from the far side. That journey would take 2 years, and our ships would arrive with empty fuel tanks and broken engines. We do not have the supplies for such a mission." The Valori High Speaker raised one crystalline hand for silence. "We will send diplomats. We will offer better terms. The humans are reasonable. They will negotiate." 3 diplomatic ships were sent to the edge of human space. They carried messages of friendship and promises of fair treatment. They waited at the border for a response. None came. After 1 week, the ships turned around and went home. They reported that human space was completely dark. No signals, no communications, no movement at all. It was as if 200 billion humans had simply vanished. The Concord grew worried. They sent more ships, scout vessels, science teams, small fleets meant to investigate without threatening. None of them came back. There was no violence. There were no explosions or distress signals. The ships simply entered human space and disappeared. Sensors showed nothing. There was no trace of battle or destruction. The ships were just gone. Fear began to spread through the galaxy. What had happened to humanity? What were they doing in their dark and silent space? What were they building? The Kreth Dominion decided to send a message that could not be ignored. 3 of their greatest warships, massive dreadnoughts with weapons that could crack planets, jumped to the edge of human territory. They broadcast demands for surrender and threatened total destruction. The dreadnoughts vanished like all the others. 2 weeks later, they reappeared. They drifted out of hyperspace at the edge of Kreth territory, moving slowly and silently. When boarding teams entered the ships, they found them completely empty. The crews were gone. The weapons were gone. Even the food in the kitchens was gone. But the ships themselves were untouched. Not a single scratch marked their hulls. Not a single system was damaged. It was as if giant hands had simply reached in and removed everything living, then gently placed the empty shells back where they came from. The crews were found 3 days later, wandering on a small moon in a nearby system. They were alive and healthy. They had food and water and shelter. But they remembered nothing. Their minds were blank from the moment they entered human space to the moment they woke up on that moon. Only one thing remained to tell them what had happened. A message burned into the hull of each dreadnought in perfect Kreth script. The words were simple and clear. You were warned. You did not listen. What comes next is not war. It is consequence. The Kreth ambassador read those words and felt something he had never felt before. He felt afraid. Across the galaxy, the other elder races read those words too. They looked at the empty dreadnoughts. They thought about their vanished scouts and diplomats. They thought about the silence coming from human space, and they began to understand that something terrible was happening, something they had caused, something they could not stop. The Galactic Concord had ruled the stars for 50,000 years. They had crushed rebellions and conquered empires. They had faced enemies with weapons of unimaginable power. But they had never faced an enemy who simply refused to fight. They had never faced an enemy who just disappeared, and they had no idea what to do about it. In the dark halls of the Concord, the elder races argued and blamed each other. They made plans and abandoned them. They sent more ships and lost more ships. And all the while, the silence from human space grew deeper. The darkness grew darker. The fear grew stronger. Something was coming. Everyone could feel it. They just did not know what it was. Deep inside human space, far from the eyes of the galaxy, Admiral Marcus Chen stood on the bridge of a ship that should not exist. The HSS Defiance was 3 kilometers long. Its hull was made of materials that Concord scientists said were impossible to create. Its engines could move it faster than anything the elder races had ever built. Its weapons could tear holes in the fabric of space itself, and it was just one of 10,000 ships like it. Admiral Chen looked out at the fleet gathering in the darkness between stars, battleships and carriers, destroyers and cruisers, support vessels and troop transports, a military force larger than anything humanity had ever assembled. All of it built in secret. All of it hidden from the galaxy that thought humans were weak and primitive. "Status report," he said quietly. His second-in-command, Captain Sarah Okonkwo, checked her displays. "All fleet elements are in position, Admiral. Construction of the final wave is 92% complete. We will have full operational capacity in 6 weeks." Chen nodded slowly. 6 weeks, after decades of preparation, after generations of planning, after centuries of pretending to be less than they were. He thought about the history of his species. Humans had always been underestimated. They were small and soft compared to the predators they faced on Earth. They had no claws, no fangs, no armor. By all logic, they should have been prey. Instead, they had conquered their world. They had tamed fire and built cities and reached for the stars, not because they were the strongest or the fastest, but because they were the most determined, the most creative, the most willing to do whatever it took to survive. The elder races had made the same mistake that Earth's ancient predators made. They had looked at humans and seen weakness. They had not understood that human weakness was a mask, a strategy, a trap. "Show me the timeline," Chen said. A hologram appeared in front of him. It showed the history of human expansion into space. The official history, which the galaxy knew, was simple. Humans had discovered faster-than-light travel about 300 years ago. They had slowly built colonies and established trade routes. They had worked hard and made themselves useful to the elder races. The real history was different. Humans had discovered faster-than-light travel 400 years ago. For the first century, they had explored in secret. They had mapped the galaxy. They had studied the elder races. They had learned their weaknesses and their blind spots. Then they had made a choice. They could reveal their true power and challenge the Concord directly, or they could hide their strength and wait for the right moment. They chose to wait. For 300 years, humanity had played the role of the eager young species. They had smiled and bowed and accepted insults. They had let the elder races believe they were harmless, and all the while they had been preparing. Shadow shipyards hidden in asteroid fields. Research stations built in dimensions that the Concord did not know existed. Weapons developed in laboratories buried deep under dead moons. The elder races thought they understood human technology. They had seen human ships and human weapons. They had analyzed human science and found it impressive but limited. They had not seen the real technology, the ships that could become invisible to any sensor, the weapons that could fold space like paper, the engines that could cross the galaxy in days instead of months. and they had not seen the most dangerous weapon of all. On Titan, the largest moon of Saturn, Dr. Yuki Tanaka worked in a laboratory that officially did not exist. She was a small woman with tired eyes and steady hands. She had spent her entire life working on a single project. The device in front of her was about the size of a human heart. It did not look impressive. Just a sphere of dark metal covered in strange symbols. But inside that sphere was the power to reshape the galaxy. Dr. Tanaka called it the Severance Engine. Hyperspace lanes were the highways of galactic civilization. Every species used them to travel between stars. The elder races had mapped these lanes over thousands of years. They had built their empires around them. The Severance Engine could destroy those lanes. Permanently. With a single activation, Dr. Tanaka could cut any star system off from the rest of the galaxy. She could isolate entire species in their home territories. She could collapse the connections that held the Concord together. Or she could do something even worse. She could collapse all the lanes at once. Every species in the galaxy would be trapped, alone, unable to reach their colonies or their allies. Civilization would shatter into a billion tiny pieces. Dr. Tanaka looked at the device and felt the weight of what she had created. This was not a weapon of war. This was a weapon of endings. A way to unmake everything the galaxy had built. She hoped they would never have to use it fully, but she knew that hope was not a strategy. On the bridge of the Defiance, Admiral Chen received her final report. "The Severance Engine is complete and operational," he told his officers. "Dr. Tanaka is ready to deploy on my command." Captain Okonkwo looked at him with serious eyes. "Are we really going to do this, Admiral? Once we start, there is no going back." Chen thought about the Concord's demands. "Surrender your colonies. Submit to genetic control. Accept slavery forever." He thought about the laughter of the Kreth ambassador, the cold dismissal of the Nethkai, the ancient arrogance of the Velori. "They wanted us gone from their negotiations," he said quietly. "They wanted a galaxy without humanity. Let us show them what that looks like." He turned to face his fleet. 10,000 ships, millions of soldiers, centuries of preparation. "Begin Operation Consequence," he ordered. "It is time for the galaxy to learn the price of contempt." Across human space, engines roared to life. Ships began to move. Weapons systems powered up. The silence was over. The reckoning had begun. The Velori homeworld had stood for 50,000 years. It was a planet of crystal towers and singing halls where beings of living stone had built the greatest civilization the galaxy had ever known. They had watched younger species rise and fall. They had survived wars and plagues and cosmic disasters. They believed nothing could shake them. They were wrong. It began at midnight, by their ancient calendar. The hyperspace beacons that connected their world to the rest of the galaxy flickered once, twice, and then went dark. Scientists rushed to their instruments. Engineers checked their systems. Everything seemed to be working correctly. But the lanes were gone. High Counselor Thresvale stood in the Great Communications Center and watched his operators try to contact their 12 colony worlds. Nothing worked. Every signal vanished into empty space. Every ship that tried to enter hyperspace simply could not find the lanes. "What is happening?" he demanded. "What has gone wrong?" His chief scientist, a Velori whose crystal body flickered with stress, could barely speak. "The lanes are not malfunctioning, High Counselor. They are destroyed. Someone has collapsed the hyperspace corridors connecting us to our colonies." "That is impossible. No technology can do that. Human technology can." The words hung in the air like poison. Human technology. The primitive humans, the young species that built their simple machines and did their simple work. The species the Concord had dismissed and insulted and tried to enslave. Those humans had just cut the Velori off from their empire. The same scene repeated across the galaxy. The Kreth Dominion woke to find half their military bases unreachable. The Nethkai discovered that their most important research stations had been isolated. Species that had bullied their neighbors for thousands of years suddenly found themselves alone and afraid. The Galactic Concord tried to meet, but 3 of the 12 elder races could not attend. Their communications were dead. Their representatives could not travel. The Great Alliance was already breaking apart. Those who could still meet gathered in a smaller hall, their faces filled with fear and anger. The Kreth ambassador slammed his fist on the table hard enough to crack the stone. "We must strike back. We must show these humans the price of attacking us." "Strike back how?" the Nethkai representative asked. Its voice was quiet and cold. "Our fleets cannot reach them. Our weapons cannot find them. They have not attacked us. They have simply disconnected us. Then we reconnect. We rebuild the lanes." "That would take centuries, if it is even possible. We do not understand how they destroyed the lanes. We do not understand their technology at all. We never did." Silence fell over the hall. The elder races, who had ruled the galaxy for so long, finally understood the truth. They had never taken humanity seriously. They had never studied human technology carefully. They had assumed that because humans were young, they must be weak. Now, they were paying for that assumption. The broadcast came 3 days later. Every screen in the galaxy, every communication device, every holographic display suddenly showed the same image. A human woman with gray hair and calm eyes, Ambassador Elena Vance. The same woman who had walked out of the Concord Hall 6 months ago. "People of the galaxy," she said. Her voice was quiet but clear. "You are wondering what is happening. You are wondering why your lanes have failed and your colonies have gone silent. I am here to explain." She paused, and her eyes seemed to look directly at every being watching. 6 months ago, I came to the Galactic Concord seeking partnership. I offered friendship and fair trade and mutual respect. In return, you demanded our territories, our children, and our freedom. When we refused, you laughed. Her expression did not change. She did not sound angry. She sounded sad. "We did not come to you because we needed you. We came because we wanted to be good neighbors. We wanted to be part of something larger than ourselves. But you showed us that the galaxy does not want partners. It wants servants." Behind her, images appeared. Human ships, human weapons, human technology that the elder races had never seen. Things that seemed to break the laws of physics. Things that should have been impossible. "You believed we were weak because we were young. You believed we were primitive because we worked with our hands. You believed we would crawl back to accept any terms you offered because we had no other choice." The images faded, leaving only her face. "You were wrong." She leaned forward slightly. "Every species that voted for those shameful terms has now experienced the consequences. Your hyperspace lanes have been restructured. Some of your colonies are now unreachable. Your economies will struggle. Your empires will shake. But we are not conquerors. We are not murderers. We have not killed a single being. We have simply given you what you wanted." Her voice grew quieter, but somehow more powerful. "You wished to be rid of humanity. You wished to build a galaxy without us. Granted. Now learn what that means. Learn to grow your own food without human farmers. Learn to build your own machines without human engineers. Learn to heal your own sick without human doctors. We did these things alone for thousands of years, on a small planet at the edge of the galaxy. Surely the mighty elder races can manage without us." She stood up, and the image began to fade. "When you are ready to discuss real partnership, when you are ready to treat us as equals, you know where to find us. Until then, enjoy your galaxy. You earned it." The screens went dark. Across 1,000 worlds, Beings of every species stared at the empty displays. Some were angry, some were afraid, some were already calculating how bad things would get. On the Vialori homeworld, High Counselor Thresvale watched food riots begin in the streets below his tower. Without imports from their colonies, they could not feed their population. Without human engineers, they could not fix their broken systems. Their ancient civilization was already starting to crack. In the Kreth Dominion, military commanders turned against each other. Without centralized control, old rivalries exploded into violence. The great warrior empire began to tear itself apart. Among the Nethkai, the cold calculations of survival replaced all other thoughts. They had always been logical. Now their logic told them something simple. They could not win this fight. They could not even compete. The galaxy was changing, the old order was dying, and humanity had not fired a single shot. They had simply stopped helping, and that, it turned out, was the most devastating weapon of all. 1 year had passed since humanity went silent. 1 year since the hyperspace lanes began to fail. 1 year since the galaxy learned the true cost of contempt. The Galactic Concord no longer existed. Its great hall still floated between the stars, but no one came to fill its seats. The 12 elder races that had ruled the galaxy were broken and scattered. Their empires had crumbled. Their power had turned to dust. The Kreth Dominion had shattered into 17 warring factions. Without their colonies to feed their armies, without their trade routes to supply their weapons, the great warriors had turned on each other. Cities burned, populations starved. The species that had believed strength was the only truth discovered, that strength without unity was just chaos. The Vialori faced extinction. Their crystalline bodies required rare minerals that came from distant worlds they could no longer reach. Millions had already died, their beautiful forms cracking and fading as their bodies failed. The oldest civilization in the galaxy was slowly disappearing. The Nethkai had survived better than most. Their cold logic had helped them adapt. But even they had lost half their population. Their great universities were empty. Their research stations were dark. The species that had believed in their own superior intelligence had learned that intelligence without resources was just cleverness. And then, quietly, the situation began to change. A hyperspace lane opened. Just one, at first. A small corridor connecting a minor Valori colony to the main trade routes. Then another lane opened, connecting a Kreth mining world to its neighbors. Then another, and another. The humans were rebuilding the galaxy, slowly, carefully, on their own terms. Chancellor Elena Vance received the first ambassadors in a hall that had been built on the ruins of the old Concord Chamber. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. They had no interest in empire. But they had claimed this place as neutral ground, a symbol of what had been and what could be. The ambassadors who came were not the proud rulers who had once sneered at humanity. These were broken beings, desperate and humble. The Vialori High Speaker came in person. Its crystal body was dull and cracked, barely alive. The Kreth ambassador had lost 2 of his 4 arms in the civil wars. The Nethkai representative was young, one of the few of its generation who had survived the collapse. They knelt before the human chancellor, actually knelt, on the cold floor of the hall. They had never knelt before anyone. Their species had not evolved for kneeling, but they did it anyway because they had no pride left. Elena Vance looked at them for a long moment. She remembered standing in this same place 1 year ago, being told that her people must surrender their territories and their children. She remembered the laughter, the dismissal, the absolute certainty that humans were nothing. "Stand up," she said quietly. "We do not want your submission. We never did." The ambassadors rose slowly, confused. "We can restore your lanes," Elena continued. "We can resume trade. We can help you rebuild your worlds. We have no desire to watch your species die. We are not monsters." Hope flickered in the eyes of the broken beings before her. "But the terms have changed." She activated a hologram that showed a new map of the galaxy. New trade routes, new agreements, new rules. The first principle is simple: equal representation. Every species has one vote in the new council, not 12 elder species ruling over everyone else. One species, one vote. No exceptions. The ambassadors nodded quickly. They would have agreed to anything. The second principle is respect. No species will ever again demand that another species surrender its territories, control its population, or accept permanent lower status. We are all equals in this galaxy. We will treat each other that way. The third principle is contribution. Every species must contribute to the common good. No more letting others do the hard work while you enjoy the benefits. If you want to be part of this new order, you must earn your place. The Valori High Speaker spoke, its voice weak and wavering. And if we agree to these terms, if we accept this new order, will you restore our lanes? Will you help us survive? Elena looked at the ancient being. 50,000 years of history stood before her, reduced to begging for survival. She felt no joy in this, no satisfaction, only a deep, tired sadness. "Yes," she said. "We will help you, all of you, because that is what equals do. They help each other." The new treaty was signed that day. The New Galactic Compact, they called it. Humanity did not lead it. They did not want to lead. They simply wanted to make sure that no species would ever again face what they had faced in that old hall. In the months that followed, human ships spread across the galaxy. They carried food and medicine and engineers. They helped rebuild what had been broken. They asked for nothing in return except fair treatment and honest partnership. The Valori High Speaker, restored to health by human medical technology, asked the question that haunted every surviving elder race. They stood in the same hall where everything had changed, watching human workers repair the ancient crystal walls. "How did you do this? You were young. You were small. You were nothing compared to us. How did you defeat the entire galaxy without fighting a single battle?" Chancellor Vance smiled. It was a human expression that the aliens had learned to respect. "You measured our worth by our age, by our territory, by our place in your hierarchy. You saw a young species and assumed we were weak. You saw workers and assumed we were servants." She turned to face the ancient being directly. "You never measured our resolve. Humanity spent its entire existence fighting for survival, against nature that wanted to kill us, against each other when resources were scarce, against extinction itself, again and again. You gave us something we had not had in centuries, a common enemy, something to prove, someone to show exactly what we were capable of." The High Speaker's crystal body flickered with something that might have been shame. "We wanted to teach you your place. Instead, you taught us ours." Elena shook her head. "That was never our goal. We did not want to humiliate you. We wanted to be your partners. We wanted to build something together. You refused. So we showed you what the galaxy looks like without us. We hoped you would learn." She gestured at the workers, human and alien working side by side. "And you did learn. We all learned. The galaxy works better when we work together, when we respect each other, when we remember that every species has value no matter how young or old." The High Speaker was silent for a long moment. Then it did something that no Valori had ever done to a human before. It bowed, deeply and formally, acknowledging Elena Vance as an equal. "Thank you," it said, "for your mercy, for your help, for teaching us what we had forgotten." Elena bowed back. "Thank you for learning, and for giving us a chance to be part of something greater than ourselves. That is all we ever wanted." Outside, the galaxy continued to rebuild. Old wounds slowly healed. New partnerships formed. The new galactic compact grew stronger every day. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. They had simply reminded it of something important, something that all the elder races had forgotten in their 50,000 years of power. Every species matters. Every voice counts, and those who forget this truth will eventually learn it again. The hard way.